"You don't belong here," the owner hissed, his voice dripping with venom as two burly security guards grabbed Malik by the arms. Malik froze, his mind racing to catch up with the surreal situation unfolding before him. "What? Wait, what are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice firm but tinged with disbelief. He tried pulling away, but their grip tightened like a vice. "I'm sorry, sir," one of the guards muttered, avoiding eye contact entirely. "Sorry?" Malik shot back, his frustration bubbling over. "For what? I have a reservation under Johnson." His words hung in the air, met only with silence from the staff and murmurs from nearby patrons who had turned their heads at the commotion. The restaurant owner stepped closer, his posture radiating authority, or perhaps arrogance. "We don't make mistakes about our guests," he said coolly, his tone dismissive and final. As the guards began dragging him toward the exit, Malik's heart pounded furiously. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It felt personal, calculated. And yet, there was no time to process it. The world around him seemed to blur into chaos. The clinking of fine china echoed through the room, a stark contrast to the tension gripping Malik. Patrons sipped wine and whispered behind manicured hands, their reactions ranging from shock to indifference. Some glanced furtively, others outright started, but none intervened. Servers moved cautiously around the scene, hesitating mid-step as though unsure whether stepping in would cost them more than looking away. One woman adjusted her pearl necklace nervously while another man leaned back in his chair, observing the altercation with detached curiosity. It was surreal. The opulence surrounding Malik made his predicament feel even more suffocating. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over polished tables adorned with linen napkins and silverware that gleamed under careful attention. Yet none of it belonged to him, not tonight. Every second stretched longer than the last, amplifying the weight of exclusion pressing down on him. How could such luxury coexist with such blatant disregard for human dignity? The question burned in his chest, fueling both confusion and anger. All eyes were on Malik now, each gaze piercing through him like daggers. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill of the air-conditioned space, and his pulse thundered in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to fight back. But against what exactly? This wasn't just about being asked to leave, it was about being told, once again, that spaces like this weren't meant for people like him. That success didn't shield you from prejudice, no matter how hard you worked or how far you climbed. He felt small. Not because of anything he'd done, but because society kept finding ways to remind him of where they thought he belonged. Or rather, where they believed he didn't. The humiliation gnawed at him, raw and unrelenting. It wasn't enough to simply walk away quietly, not when every fiber of his being rebelled against accepting defeat. But how could he win when the odds were stacked so impossibly high? "But my reservation is under Johnson," Malik insisted, his voice rising above the murmur of onlookers. "We don't make mistakes about our guests," Mr. Hayes repeated smugly, crossing his arms as if daring Malik to challenge him further. "This isn't a mistake. It's discrimination," Malik fired back, his desperation giving way to defiance. A server nearby shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Malik and the owner before retreating silently. Another patron whispered audibly to their companion, "Is this really necessary?" Hayes' expression hardened. "Sir, I suggest you leave peacefully before things escalate further." "Escalate? You've already humiliated me in front of everyone," Malik countered, gesturing toward the crowd now watching intently. "And for what? Because I dared to show up expecting to be treated like anyone else." The room seemed to hold its breath, caught between discomfort and intrigue. Servers froze mid-motion, plates hovering uncertainty above tables. Even the child at a nearby booth chimed in innocently, "Why are they taking him out?" Hayes ignored the question, motioning for the guards to proceed. "Take him outside," he ordered curtly, turning his back as if dismissing Malik altogether. As the guards dragged Malik toward the door, someone discreetly raised their phone, capturing the entire ordeal on camera. The lens focused on Malik's anguished face, his jaw clenched in quiet fury. The child's innocent query lingered in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Around the room, whispers grew louder, some sympathetic, others dismissive, but none loud enough to stop what was happening. Malik caught sight of the person filming and locked eyes briefly. Was it pity he saw reflected there? Or solidarity? Either way, it struck him that this moment wouldn't end here. It couldn't. Not when technology allowed stories like his to spread beyond these walls. Outside, raindrops began pelting the pavement, mingling with the chaos spilling out of the restaurant. The footage being recorded promised something bigger, a chance to expose truths too often swept under the rug. But for now, Malik stood alone, drenched not just by water, but by the weight of everything this night represented. The rain soaked through Malik's suit almost instantly, plastering his shirt to his skin and sending rivulets streaming down his face. Each drop felt symbolic. Cleansing, yes, but also relentless, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. Humiliation warred with determination as he replayed the events in his mind. They thought they could erase him, make him disappear without consequence. But they underestimated who he was and what he was capable of fighting for. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the patter of rain. Yet the conviction in those 4 words rang clear. Standing there, surrounded by darkness and dampness, Malik realized this wasn't just about reclaiming his seat at a table. It was about dismantling the barriers designed to keep people like him standing outside in the cold. And as lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the city skyline, he knew exactly where to start. But the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. It rarely was when justice demanded accountability. Malik wasn't used to being dismissed so easily. At professional events, he often found himself correcting assumptions, like when a client once handed him their coat, mistaking him for a valet attendant. "Actually," he'd said with a tight smile, "I'm leading this project." It was exhausting, constantly navigating spaces where his presence seemed conditional. Yet, despite the microaggressions, Malik had risen to become one of the most sought-after architects in the city. His designs graced skylines, blending innovation with functionality. He worked tirelessly, determined not to let prejudice define his path. But no matter how many accolades he earned, there was always someone ready to question whether he truly belonged. Tonight, though, was supposed to be different, a celebration of hard-won success. Instead, it became another reminder that bias didn't rest, not even in places draped in luxury and privilege. Malik had spent years proving his worth in an industry dominated by people who looked nothing like him. He'd learned to navigate subtle slights, the way colleagues would address white counterparts first during meetings or assume his role was subordinate until proven otherwise. These moments wore on him, but they also fueled his determination to succeed. Even now, as he replayed the restaurant incident in his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if this was just another test, an obstacle placed deliberately in his way to see if he'd falter. But Malik wasn't someone who gave up easily. Every challenge only strengthened his resolve. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood taught Malik early lessons about survival and resilience. His mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, would come home exhausted but still find time to encourage him. "You've got greatness inside you," she'd say, her voice unwavering despite the weight of her own struggles. School wasn't kind to Malik either. Teachers often underestimated him, steering him toward vocational programs instead of advanced classes. Classmates mocked his aspirations of becoming an architect, saying things like, "People like us don't do stuff like that." But Malik held on to his grandmother's stories, tales of overcoming segregation, of dreaming beyond boundaries meant to confine them. Her words echoed in his mind now. "Sometimes, they'll try to tell you where you belong. Don't listen." Even as a child, Malik learned to channel frustration into focus. He spent hours sketching buildings in notebooks, envisioning structures that defied limits. Those sketches became blueprints for his future, a metaphorical foundation built on resilience and defiance. His mother sacrificed everything to provide stability, working long hours while instilling values of perseverance and integrity. She saved every penny to buy him a set of drafting tools when he turned 16, a gift that felt monumental at the time. It wasn't just equipment. It was validation of his dreams. Through high school, Malik faced skepticism from teachers who doubted his potential. One counselor even suggested he consider trade school, implying his ambitions were unrealistic. But Malik refused to lower his gaze. With his mother's encouragement and his grandmother's legacy guiding him, he applied to prestigious universities and got accepted into one of the top architecture programs in the country. Looking back, Malik realized those early challenges shaped him into the man he was today. They taught him to push through adversity, to build bridges where others saw walls. And while the scars remained, the memories of being told he didn't belong, they only made his victories sweeter. In the architecture world, Malik quickly realized success wouldn't come without sacrifice, and twice the effort. Networking events felt like minefields. Colleagues ignored him or talked over him, dismissing his contributions until someone else repeated them verbatim. Once, after presenting a groundbreaking design concept, a senior partner turned to a white colleague and complimented him on the idea. Later, Malik confronted him privately, only to be met with a patronizing pat on the back. "Don't worry, your turn will come." These moments chipped away at him, fueling both his drive and his simmering anger. He poured everything into his work, determined to prove his worth, not just for himself, but for every black child told their dreams were too big. Still, the emotional toll lingered, manifesting in sleepless nights and clenched fists hidden beneath boardroom tables. Despite the setbacks, Malik refused to give up. Each snub fueled his determination to succeed, not just personally, but as a symbol of resistance against systemic exclusion. Every award, every completed building, was proof that talent couldn't be silenced forever. He remembered one particular project, a sleek skyscraper designed to reflect sunlight in mesmerizing patterns. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony took place, none of the executives thanked him publicly, though his name appeared last on the plaque. Standing there, watching champagne glasses clink around him, Malik vowed never to let anyone diminish his contributions again. The experience taught him something crucial. Recognition wouldn't always come willingly. Sometimes you have to demand it. So he began speaking up more often, challenging dismissive attitudes and advocating for fair acknowledgement. Still, the constant battle weighed heavily on him. There were days when he questioned whether the fight was worth it, if the cost of proving himself outweighed the rewards. But then he'd think of his mother, scrubbing floors late into the night to give him opportunities she never had, and he knew quitting wasn't an option. Malik carried these experiences with him everywhere, using them as fuel to push forward. Each insult, each slight, reinforced his commitment to breaking barriers, not just for himself, but for those who would follow in his footsteps. Tonight wasn't just about celebrating a contract, it was about breaking barriers. For years, Malik had fought to carve out a space in an industry that rarely welcomed people like him. Landing this prestigious deal with a major real estate developer symbolized more than personal achievement. It represented progress. He envisioned future generations walking into rooms like these without needing to fight for their seat at the table. That vision made tonight's reservation feel monumental, a testament to perseverance against systemic odds. But as Malik replayed the restaurant incident in his mind, doubt crept in. Had he missed something? Could he have handled it differently? The questions gnawed at him, threatening to overshadow the significance of what he'd achieved. This dinner was supposed to mark a turning point, a moment where all his hard work culminated in recognition. Instead, it highlighted the persistent biases he thought he'd overcome. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, celebrated for shaping skylines, yet unable to secure a simple reservation. Yet, even in disappointment, Malik recognized the importance of this moment. It wasn't just about him, it was about sending a message. If he allowed this injustice to slide, he'd be complicit in perpetuating the very system he sought to dismantle. As rain continued to patter against his window, Malik stared out at the city skyline, one he'd helped shape. Maybe tonight hadn't gone as planned, but tomorrow offered a chance to rewrite the narrative. Back in the present, Malik couldn't shake the memory of being dragged out of the restaurant. He replayed every detail, the smugness in Mr. Hayes' voice, the indifferent stars from patrons, the humiliation of being treated like an intruder in a place he'd rightfully reserved. Was it something I did? He wondered aloud, pacing his apartment. Or was it always going to end this way? The injustice weighed heavily on him, but beneath the frustration lay a flicker of resolve. Letting this slide wasn't an option, not when it represented everything wrong with the system he'd spent years challenging. As rain continued to patter against his window, Malik stared out at the city skyline, one he'd helped shape. Maybe tonight hadn't gone as planned, but tomorrow offered a chance to rewrite the narrative. Malik arrived at the upscale restaurant precisely on time, his tailored suit reflecting both confidence and professionalism. Yet, as he approached the hostess stand, her demeanor shifted subtly. Her smile faded, and she avoided eye contact. "Name?" she asked curtly, barely glancing up from her clipboard. "Johnson," Malik replied, his tone polite but firm. She flipped through pages, unnecessarily, her hesitation palpable. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice devoid of sincerity. "You're not on the list." The words hit him like a gut punch. He'd made the reservation days ago, double-checking every detail to ensure tonight would go smoothly. "That's impossible," he countered, leaning slightly forward. "Could you check again? It's under Malik Johnson." She shook her head dismissively, already turning away to greet another guest, a white man who received an immediate smile and warm welcome. Malik felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't unfamiliar territory. It was just another reminder that spaces like these weren't designed with people like him in mind. Still, he swallowed his frustration and decided to wait, hoping logic might prevail. As Malik stood by the lobby, scrolling absent-mindedly through work emails, the subtle signs of exclusion began stacking up. A server passed by with a tray of water glasses, offering refills to nearby guests but ignoring Malik entirely. When he finally flagged someone down, the server mumbled vaguely about being too busy before hurrying off. Minutes later, he noticed a group of white patrons walk in without reservations. And yet, within moments, they were ushered to their table with smiles and apologies for the brief wait. Meanwhile, Malik remained stranded, his presence seemingly invisible. The accumulation of these small indignities gnawed at him. Each ignored request, each dismissive glance, added weight to an already heavy evening. He tried rationalizing it. Perhaps the staff was overwhelmed, but deep down he knew better. These weren't isolated incidents. They were patterns, fragments of a larger system built to exclude. A particularly jarring moment came when a server addressed only his colleagues seated near him, completely bypassing Malik despite his clear attempts to get attention. The message was unspoken but loud. "You don't belong here." His jaw tightened as anger simmered beneath the surface. He wanted to confront someone, demand answers, but experience told him such actions often ended poorly. Instead, he resolved to stay calm, clinging to the hope that reason would prevail eventually. Yet, as more time passed and nothing changed, Malik couldn't ignore the growing sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about years of facing similar treatment, always expected to endure silently. While waiting, Malik observed another black couple approach the hostess stand. They exchanged pleasantries, only to be met with the same dismissive response. "We're fully booked." "But there are empty tables right over there," the woman protested, gesturing toward the dining area. Her voice carried a mix of disbelief and indignation. The hostess shrugged nonchalantly, refusing to engage further. Malik watched as the couple argued briefly, their frustration evident, before walking away defeated. Their expressions mirrored his own feelings, anger mixed with helplessness. This blatant act of discrimination confirmed what he'd suspected all along. The issue wasn't administrative error or oversight. It was prejudice. Seeing others treated similarly validated his experience, but it also deepened his resolve. He wrestled internally with whether to intervene, to lend support or solidarity. But stepping in felt risky. What good would it do if he too became a target? For now, he chose silence, filing the incident away as further evidence of systemic bias. Still, witnessing this injustice reignited a spark within him. If no one else would speak up, then perhaps it fell to him to challenge the status quo. The thought lingered uncomfortably, mingling with his mounting frustration. Unable to tolerate the situation any longer, Malik approached a manager who stood near the bar, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," he began, keeping his tone measured despite his rising agitation. "I've been waiting for nearly 30 minutes despite having a confirmed reservation under Johnson." The manager glanced at him briefly before responding with practiced indifference. "Let me check into that for you," he said, though his body language suggested disinterest. After a perfunctory search, he declared, "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no record of your reservation." "That can't be right," Malik pressed, his voice firmer now. "I called ahead multiple times to confirm, and I've seen other guests seated without issue, even those without reservations." The manager shrugged, deflecting responsibility. "Mistakes happen sometimes. Perhaps there was a miscommunication." Malik clenched his fists, biting back a sharper retort. The deflection infuriated him, not because of the denial itself, but because it was so predictable. This was how systems protected themselves, by shifting blame, creating doubt, making victims question their own sanity. Realizing he wouldn't get anywhere with this man, Malik stepped back, his mind racing. There had to be a way to hold them accountable, to expose the truth behind their polished facades. Frustrated by the endless cycle of dismissal, Malik decided enough was enough. If intermediaries refused to take accountability, then he'd go straight to the source. Mr. Hayes, the owner himself. He spotted Hayes near the entrance, chatting casually with patrons. Gathering his resolve, Malik strode toward him, determination etched into every step. Tonight wasn't just about securing a seat at the table. It was about demanding respect and justice. As he approached, Malik's heart pounded fiercely, but his expression remained steady. He was done playing by their rules. It was time to confront the root of the problem head-on. Malik approached Mr. Hayes with a calmness that masked the storm brewing inside him. "Mr. Hayes," he began, his voice steady but firm, "I'd like to understand why I'm being treated this way." Hayes turned slowly, his smile fading as he took in Malik's determined stance. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "I have a confirmed reservation under Johnson," Malik explained, enunciating each word carefully. "Yet your staff insists I'm not on the list. Meanwhile, others without reservations are seated without hesitation." Hayes raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you suggesting we're discriminating against you?" "No," Malik shot back, his frustration breaking through. "I'm stating it outright. I've witnessed firsthand how black patrons, including myself, are turned away while others receive preferential treatment." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward them. Patrons paused mid-conversation, forks hovering above plates, as tension crackled in the air. Hayes shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such direct confrontation. "You're causing a scene," Hayes said dismissively, attempting to regain control. "If there's been a misunderstanding, I assure you it's unintentional." "A misunderstanding?" Malik echoed incredulously. "This isn't about one night. It's about a pattern of exclusion. You can deny it all you want, but the truth is undeniable." His words resonated throughout the restaurant, sparking murmurs among the crowd. Some nodded sympathetically. Others exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, Hayes seemed rattled, his polished demeanor slipping. Sensing the growing unrest, Hayes signaled to nearby security guards. "Escort this gentleman out," he ordered curtly, avoiding eye contact with Malik. Two burly men stepped forward, their expressions cold and detached. "Sir, please come with us," one of them said gruffly, gripping Malik's arm tightly. Malik pulled back instinctively, his voice rising. "No, this is unacceptable. I'm not leaving until someone explains what's really going on here." But the guards weren't interested in explanations. They tightened their grip, dragging him toward the exit despite his protests. "Let go of me," Malik demanded, his voice cutting through the hushed silence of the room. Patrons reacted differently. Some filmed discreetly, capturing every moment on their phones, while others looked away, unwilling to meet Malik's anguished gaze. A few laughed nervously, perhaps hoping to diffuse the tension, but most remained frozen, unsure how to respond. As Malik reached the doorway, he locked eyes with a young boy sitting at a nearby table. The child's innocent question pierced the chaos. Why are they taking him out? The simplicity of the question struck a chord, highlighting the absurdity of the situation. No one answered. Not the parents, not the staff, not even Hayes, who now stood stiffly near the entrance, refusing to make eye contact. Outside, the cool night air hit Malik like a slap, jolting him back to reality. His suit jacket was rumpled, his tie askew, and humiliation burned hot in his chest. But beneath the anger lay a newfound resolve. If they thought this would silence him, they were sorely mistaken. Inside, the atmosphere remained charged long after Malik was removed. Some diners whispered furiously among themselves, questioning the restaurant's policies and motives. That was completely unnecessary, muttered a woman in a red dress, shaking her head disapprovingly. Others defended the establishment, dismissing Malik's claims as exaggeration or fabrication. He probably made a mistake with his reservation, reasoned a man in a tailored suit, sipping his wine nonchalantly. Amidst the divided reactions, one brave diner spoke up. Rising from her seat, she addressed the room directly. Does anyone else see what just happened? That man was humiliated because of the color of his skin. How is that acceptable? Her words sparked murmurs of agreement, though not everyone dared vocalize support. Still, her courage inspired others to reconsider their own complicity. One couple quietly requested their bill, deciding they no longer wanted to patronize a business built on exclusion. Meanwhile, servers moved cautiously around the dining area, exchanging nervous glances. Some appeared uncomfortable with the evening's events, while others maintained stoic professionalism, unwilling to risk repercussions for speaking out. The incident underscored a broader societal issue. When faced with injustice, many chose silence over solidarity. Yet, even small acts of resistance, like filming the altercation or questioning authority, had the power to ripple outward, challenging systemic norms. Standing outside, Malik replayed the events in his mind, each memory amplifying his sense of betrayal. He'd entered the restaurant expecting fairness, only to be met with hostility disguised as policy. Worse still, the indifference of bystanders stung deeply. It wasn't just Hayes or the staff. It was the collective apathy of those who watched silently, choosing comfort over accountability. Their refusal to intervene felt like a personal rejection, reinforcing the isolation he'd fought so hard to overcome. Rain began to fall, mingling with the tears Malik refused to shed publicly. He clenched his fists, battling the urge to scream, to release the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Yet, amidst the despair, something else stirred. Resolve. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about exposing the truth, holding systems accountable, and ensuring no one else endured similar treatment. As lightning illuminated the sky, Malik realized he couldn't let this moment define him. Instead, he'd use it as fuel to spark change. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but quitting wasn't an option, not when justice demanded action. Unbeknownst to Malik, someone inside the restaurant had recorded the entire altercation. Within hours, the video spread across social media platforms, igniting outrage nationwide. Hashtags like #JusticeForMalik trended rapidly, drawing attention to systemic racism in upscale establishments. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying calls for accountability. Comment sections overflowed with personal anecdotes, as people shared their own experiences of exclusion and discrimination. Reporters gathered outside the restaurant the following day, microphones in hand, eager to hear Malik's side of the story. What had started as a private humiliation was now a public reckoning, one that promised to challenge the status quo. For Malik, this unexpected spotlight offered both opportunity and pressure. The world was watching, and he knew his next steps would shape not only his future but also the broader fight against injustice. By morning, Malik's ordeal had exploded into a national conversation. Footage of the altercation flooded social media, accompanied by hashtags like #JusticeForMalik and #EndSystemicRacism. The video captured every raw moment: Malik's calm confrontation, Hayes' dismissive tone, and the aggressive intervention of security. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their own stories of discrimination at restaurants, hotels, and other exclusive spaces. This happens more often than anyone wants to admit, one commenter wrote, echoing sentiments expressed across platforms. Mainstream news outlets joined the fray, amplifying the story with headlines like *Architect Humiliated, a spotlight on racism in upscale establishments. Journalists dissected the incident, questioning how such biases persisted in modern society. The backlash hit the restaurant hard. Sponsors began pulling funding, citing reputational risks. High-profile clients canceled reservations, unwilling to associate with a business embroiled in controversy. Protesters gathered outside daily, holding signs that read, "No justice, no peace," and "Black Lives Matter everywhere." For Malik, the overnight virality was overwhelming. Strangers messaged him offering support, while activists reached out seeking collaboration. Yet, amidst the chaos, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just his fight anymore, it belonged to everyone demanding change. Amidst the whirlwind, an unexpected ally emerged. Sarah Chun, a seasoned journalist known for her work exposing systemic racism. She reached out to Malik via email, introducing herself and expressing admiration for his courage. "I've been following your story closely," she wrote. "If you're open to it, I'd love to help amplify your voice and ensure this doesn't end without accountability." They met later that day at a quiet cafe, far from prying cameras. Sarah exuded warmth and professionalism, immediately putting Malik at ease. "You've ignited something powerful here," she said, leaning forward earnestly. "But we need to approach this strategically if we want lasting impact." Sarah explained her plan: investigate the restaurant's history, uncover evidence of discriminatory practices, and present an irrefutable case to the public. Her expertise reassured Malik, who realized he couldn't navigate this alone. Together, they vowed to hold the establishment and society accountable. Their partnership marked a turning point. With Sarah's guidance, Malik transitioned from victim to advocate, ready to reclaim his dignity and inspire others to join the fight. Sarah wasted no time diving into research. She scoured employee reviews online, uncovering complaints about racial profiling and preferential treatment. Former servers described whispered instructions during staff meetings: prioritize white patrons, or find reasons to turn away undesirables. Emails obtained through anonymous tips painted an even clearer picture. One chain revealed explicit directives to minimize bookings from minority customers during peak hours. Another outlined plans to phase out diversity training entirely, dismissing it as unnecessary. Sarah also interviewed former employees willing to speak on record. A black server recounted being reprimanded for lingering too long near tables occupied by white guests. Another described watching colleagues ignore black patrons' requests while catering excessively to others. As pieces of the puzzle came together, Malik felt vindicated yet infuriated. These revelations confirmed what he'd always suspected. The restaurant's actions weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a calculated system designed to exclude. "This is bigger than me," Malik told Sarah during one late-night meeting. "It's proof that these systems exist everywhere. We have to expose them. Not just here, but everywhere." Armed with irrefutable evidence, they prepared to confront Mr. Hayes publicly, ensuring his lies would crumble under scrutiny. The power dynamic was shifting, and Malik stood poised to seize control of the narrative. The pressure mounted exponentially for Mr. Hayes. Once untouchable, he now found himself scrambling to salvage what remained of his reputation. Sponsors withdrew endorsements, leaving gaping holes in his budget. Regular patrons distanced themselves, fearing association with scandal. Protesters outside grew louder each day, chanting slogans and staging sit-ins. Reporters hounded him for statements, forcing him to issue hollow apologies that rang false to anyone paying attention. Behind closed doors, Hayes panicked. He convened emergency meetings with PR teams, desperate to craft a response that would quell the outrage. But no amount of spin could erase the mounting evidence against him. When Sarah and Malik released their findings to the press, the final blow landed. Emails, testimonials, and documented patterns of bias painted an undeniable portrait of institutional racism. Hayes' carefully constructed facade shattered completely. Desperate, he called a press conference, attempting to address the allegations directly. Standing before reporters, he stammered excuses and half-hearted denials. But the damage was done. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. With the truth laid bare, Malik prepared for the ultimate confrontation. He wouldn't let Hayes escape accountability, not after everything he'd endured. Returning to the restaurant wasn't just symbolic. It was necessary. He strategized meticulously, planning every detail to maximize impact. Armed with evidence, allies, and newfound resolve, Malik envisioned walking through those doors again. Not as a victim, but as a force for change. The thought filled him with equal parts fear and determination. What awaited him inside? Hostility? Redemption? Regardless, he knew this moment mattered, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. As he rehearsed his speech one last time, Malik allowed himself a small smile. For years, he'd fought to be heard. Now, finally, the world was listening. This completes Section 5, adhering to the specified word counts while building tension and emotional engagement. Let me know if you'd like to proceed with the resolution. Malik stepped into the restaurant during peak hours, flanked by supporters holding signs that read, "Justice for Malik," and asterisk, "End systemic racism." Asterisk cameras flashed relentlessly as journalists jostled for position, capturing every moment of his return. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Patrons whispered nervously, some rising from their seats to get a better view. Staff froze mid-motion, unsure how to react as Malik approached the center of the dining area. Mr. Hayes appeared moments later, his usual composure replaced by visible unease. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, though his voice lacked its former authority. Malik met his gaze unflinchingly. "You humiliated me in front of everyone because of the color of my skin," he began, his tone steady but charged with emotion. "But tonight, I'm here to ensure you can't do it again, to anyone." He held up a folder containing damning evidence. Leaked emails, employee testimonials, and documented patterns of discrimination. These prove what we already knew. Your establishment thrives on exclusion. And now the world knows it too. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Sarah Chun joined him, amplifying his message. "This isn't just about one man or one restaurant," she declared. "It's about dismantling systems built to oppress. Tonight, we demand accountability and change." Hayes faltered, his defenses crumbling under the weight of irrefutable proof. Malik opened the folder, revealing specific examples of systemic racism embedded within the restaurant's operations. He highlighted an email chain where managers discussed turning away Black patrons during high-profile events. "This wasn't a mistake. It was policy," Malik stated firmly, addressing both Hayes and the audience. "They didn't want people like me here, no matter how qualified or deserving we are." Sarah took over, presenting additional findings. Former employees have come forward, detailing instructions to prioritize white guests while ignoring others. "This isn't hearsay. It's a documented fact." As she spoke, images of the incriminating documents were projected onto screens set up outside the restaurant, ensuring transparency. Protesters chanted loudly, their voices echoing through the streets. Inside, reactions varied. Some diners nodded solemnly, acknowledging the injustice. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the spotlight turned inward. A few even applauded softly, moved by Malik's courage. Hayes tried to interrupt, stammering denials, but Malik cut him off. "Save your excuses. The truth speaks louder than anything you could say." His words resonated throughout the room, leaving Hayes visibly shaken. For the first time, the owner faced the consequences of his actions, not just financially but morally. The presentation concluded with a call to action, demanding reforms not only at this restaurant but across industries perpetuating similar biases. It was clear this movement wasn't ending anytime soon. Taking a deep breath, Malik addressed the room directly, his voice trembling with emotion but unwavering in conviction. "I didn't ask for this fight," he admitted. "All I wanted was to celebrate an achievement, a milestone years in the making. But instead, I was reminded of all the ways society tries to keep people like me out." He paused, scanning the faces around him. "For too long, spaces like this have excluded us, silenced us, made us feel small. But I stand here today to tell you, we deserve better. Our voices matter. Our presence matters." His speech shifted from personal experience to broader societal issues. Systemic racism isn't just about individual acts of prejudice. It's about structures designed to marginalize. Until we dismantle those structures, justice will remain incomplete. Tears streamed down the cheeks of listeners as Malik recounted stories shared by others inspired by his ordeal. "People have reached out, telling me they've faced the same humiliation. That's why this isn't just my story, it's ours. Together, we can create a future where no one feels unwelcome because of the color of their skin." Applause erupted, growing louder as more people joined in. Even some staff members clapped hesitantly, moved by the sincerity of his words. Outside, protesters cheered, their chants blending with the energy inside. Malik ended with a rallying cry, "Change starts now. Let this moment remind us that when we stand together, we are unstoppable." The room erupted into standing ovations, cementing Malik's transformation from victim to leader. Overwhelmed by guilt and public pressure, Hayes collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." His admission shocked the room, drawing mixed reactions. Some felt sympathy, seeing a broken man desperate for redemption. Others remained skeptical, dismissing his plea as too little, too late. Malik watched silently, allowing Hayes' vulnerability to speak for itself. While forgiveness wasn't immediate or guaranteed, the moment marked a pivotal shift. Power had transferred hands, and Hayes was no longer in control. Reporters captured every second, ensuring the world witnessed this rare display of accountability. Whether genuine or performative, Hayes' apology validated Malik's claims, reinforcing the necessity of justice. In the days following the confrontation, the restaurant announced its temporary closure for reform. Management pledged full transparency, committing to diversity training, revised policies, and community outreach programs. For Malik, the victory felt bittersweet. It symbolized progress but also highlighted how far society still needed to go. Yet, he refused to dwell on setbacks. Instead, he focused on inspiring others to continue fighting against systemic racism. Support poured in from across the globe, elevating Malik to a symbol of empowerment. Schools invited him to speak, organizations sought partnerships, and activists rallied behind his cause. Though challenges lay ahead, Malik embraced the role thrust upon him. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but with persistence, unity, and hope, it would happen. Alone in his apartment, Malik reflected on the journey. Each setback had tested him, yet each triumph reinforced his belief in resilience. "The fight isn't over," he murmured, staring at the city skyline. "But neither am I." He envisioned a future where barriers crumbled, replaced by inclusivity and equity. Though daunting, the vision fueled his determination. Malik smiled softly, knowing he'd sparked something bigger than himself. The road ahead remained uncertain, but so did the promise of a brighter tomorrow. What would you have done if you were in Malik's shoes? The question lingered, inviting viewers to step into his world and reflect on their own responses to injustice. In the comments section below, countless voices chimed in, some sharing personal experiences of discrimination, others expressing admiration for Malik's courage. "I wouldn't have been able to stay so calm," one viewer admitted. Another wrote, "This makes me realize how much work we still need to do." By asking directly, Malik ensured the conversation didn't end with his story. It sparked dialogue about systemic racism and accountability. Each response added depth to the narrative, reminding everyone that change begins with individual action. Malik urged viewers to join broader conversations about combating racism in everyday life. Awareness is the first step, he emphasized, but action is what drives real change. He recommended resources, books like So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, documentaries such as 13th, and organizations advocating for racial equity. Links scrolled across the screen, encouraging further exploration. Start small, Malik advised. Speak up when you witness bias. Support businesses owned by marginalized communities. Educate yourself and others. The message resonated deeply. Viewers pledged to take action, whether through volunteering, donating, or simply listening more intently. Together, they formed a collective force committed to dismantling oppressive systems, one conversation at a time. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, Malik encouraged warmly. Stories like these matter, and your support helps amplify them. A teaser followed. Next time, we'll explore another gripping tale of resilience and justice. Will accountability prevail again? Stay tuned to find out. As the video faded to black, subscribers flooded in, eager to hear more. The engagement booster succeeded, ensuring Malik's message reached wider audiences while leaving room for future narratives.